You're listening to Raceway Ministries Today. Thanks for joining us for Raceway Ministries Today. In just a few moments, we're going to give you the latest of what's going on in motorsports outreach through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. We'd like to welcome you to today's edition of Raceway Ministries Today. I'm Roger Marsh, currently serving as the interim executive director for the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. And today we have on the phone with us, all the way from Muskegon, Michigan, Larry Bush, who is the director of Fast Track Ministries. And in that capacity, he serves at the Berlin Raceway up there in the Muskegon area. And then also, he is part of our board of directors for the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. And Larry, I want to welcome you today. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to conversing with you for a while.
Well, good. All right. Well, I hope you and Marilyn are doing good up there in the Muskegon area. And certainly want to let you know how much we appreciate your service on our board of directors for the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. And we'll talk about some of the endeavors of NFRM as we move along in our conversation today. But I just want to let you know how much we really appreciate you and Marilyn and the role that y'all play on our board of directors. You guys have a lot of great experience, and you offer us a lot of wisdom and insight in the decisions that we make and the strategies that we put together for reaching people at the raceways, and we are deeply appreciative of that. Now, Larry, you also have been involved in pastoral ministry. I know you've been a part of our board of directors at least since the middle 2000s, I believe. In fact, I was going through some old notes the other day on my computer, and I think you were scheduled to maybe rotate off of the board of directors back in, 2009, 2010, somewhere along there. And you, of course, have continued to serve as needs have dictated since that time. But you've been on our board of directors for a long time, and you bring to us a wealth of ministry experience. Tell me a little bit about your pastoral ministry. I know you're involved in several churches currently, doing some pastoral work. And what's been your past? I mean, you've been in pastoral ministry apparently for a long time.
Yes, sir. And I tell everybody I have never worked a day in my adult life.
Really?
I enjoy ministry. God has called me to a ministry, and I've been a pastor now for 55 years.
Wow, I had no idea.
We have pastored in several different communities, but mostly the last 35 years here in Muskegon, Michigan.
Okay.
And the Lord has taken us through, as every pastor has, a lot of times of change.
Oh, sure.
But the ministry and the message always remains the same.
Good.
And methods change.
They do.
But the people don't. And neither does God's Word.
Yeah, you're so right.
And so that is the focus of our ministry, to build the Church of God, or be a part of His building, His own church, like He needs our help,
Oh, yeah.
So currently I'm at the Black Creek Bible Church, which is my primary calling. It's a smaller church, and I have pastored as the lead pastor in large churches, and now I'm here. Mm-hmm. But I'm also a part of the Forest Park Evangelical Covenant Church. I'm their congregational care pastor, which is a nice way of saying I minister to old people.
Ah, I got you. Yeah.
So it's a wonderful experience, and I'm so glad for it. But because of that, pastors sometimes live in a bubble, and we don't really know what the outside world is going through. And one day, a long time ago, I guess it's been 35 years, I came home on a Saturday afternoon after having made some pastoral calls and mowing my grass, and my kids were all gone to camp or something, and I looked at my wife and said, "We're alone. Let's go out to the racetrack."
Ah, okay.
There was a dirt track north of town. Michigan's Adventure is one of it's just a amusement park.
Okay.
And a water park up here, and there's a racetrack, and I had driven by it, and I said, let's go up there. It's a dirt track, 3/8 mile, and she had never been to a dirt track, and so I said, let's go, and if you don't like it, we'll go home. Well, we sat in turn 4, And in a dirt track, you get dirty.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I thought she would not like it, but she loved it.
Really?
And that summer, we went every Saturday after that, taking one of our smaller grandkids or whatever to the racetrack. And the more we got there, we saw people, real people. And they were rough. Dirt tracks have a well-earned reputation for rough and
yes, sir.
booze and fights. And it's a well-earned reputation.
Oh, yes.
But the drivers would complete their heats and come up into the grandstand sits with their wives, and we were hearing languages we didn't even know. Talking about race cars and setups and horsepower and stagger and center weight and left side weight and camber and all things that we just didn't know. But we made some friends. And we started to go the next summer when they opened up again. We went back, and I just said to her one Saturday night, I said, somebody's got to reach these people because they're not going to church. And so the next day, we were sat down Sunday afternoon after church. We had preached, and we were turned the TV on, and the NASCAR was on. And, of course, they started the race with an invocation and a prayer.
Yes, right.
And the announcer said, this is, I think it was Tim Griffin at the time. This is Tim Griffin from Motor Racing Outreach to lead the invocation. And I said, wow, I bet they have a website. And we looked it up, and sure enough, and we had been looking for a way to serve effectively at the racetrack. And we called them through their contact. And sure enough, they had chaplain training, and we went to Kansas City. And then, of course, we have in Michigan 40-some different venues. We have the International Speedway, of course, which is our NASCAR track.
Right.
And then a bunch of dirt tracks right around Muskegon. There was 2 of them within 10 miles of our house.
Okay.
And so they suggested just go talk to the promoter. And so we did. And the ministry has begun. We then formed Fast Track Ministry as a 501c3 corporation, raised money, and went to the owner, and he invited us in. And,
really? Awesome.
The only thing we asked from him is that we had access. And so that's how we got started. And we've been at it now for, 27 years, I think.
Wow.
And later, one of our former board members at NFRM, we met in Kansas City. I never knew him before, but his name was Dave Martin. We all know Dave. And,
yes. Oh, yes. On Track Ministries.
And he suggested that we go together to NFRM because he'd heard about NFRM as a fellowship for weekly series, short tracks, and chaplain training.
Right.
And we started with NFRM then. And uniquely enough, our first contact was at our annual conference way back, I don't know how many years ago, 20 years ago, I guess.
Okay.
And we were there, Roger, the night, the first, that wasn't our first one, but we met down at Talladega when they asked you to become our director.
Yeah, that would have been around 2000, I
And
believe.
yes, we were there. We'd already been ministering for several years, and we were there that night. And it was, I think, the next year that I was invited to join on the board. And
Wow, I didn't realize your participation on the board had gone back that far, but that's awesome.
So anyway, that was how we get to where we are, and the Lord has called us to a unique ministry. It puts us in with what I call real people, and we are able to feel the stress of the world, I guess.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. Boy, I didn't realize your history with doing Raceway Ministries work, even apart from NFRM, went back as far as what you've described. But just incredible how God opens up opportunities, and it's always interesting and fascinating to me to see how God networks with people. We have deep appreciation for David Martin and what he and Larry Avery do with On Track Ministries. And I can remember when David even described to me at one time that he felt like he was the only one doing any Raceway Ministry work out there until he was able to begin to network with some people. And apparently you and David hooked up pretty early on and began that process of mutual encouragement and probably exchanging ideas to try to get insights into how most effectively to reach the people that you just described, real people. And you know, that's the bottom line of what we're about in Raceway Ministries work. When you're inside the bubble, I guess you could call it a bubble, although it's really not. If you're in the fellowship of a local congregation and your circle of friends and your mutual influence with people is within the family of God, you do tend to not remember and not recognize what life is like outside of the realm of Christian fellowship. And when you get out there with real people, you discover real needs. You discover people struggling with life like it really is, many times without God and without His wisdom, His guidance, and without the salvation that He offers through Jesus. And so, to me, that's our calling, is to go outside the realm of the local church, really as an extension of the local church, I would describe it, to get out there in the midst of people where they are. And I can't think of a better place to do that than out at a raceway, because people are out there honestly and authentically displaying who they are. And that's where God finds us with the gospel. And so I perceive that our duty is to find an intersection opportunity to bring the gospel to those people out there. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and what you've described about Marilyn enjoying that first night out there at that dirt track. I know she's been right by your side in ministry for all these years, very sympathetic and passionate about Raceway Ministry. If you don't mind, describe just for a moment, because many of our listeners and participants in Raceway Ministries' work may not have the blessing that you have to have your lifelong partner as a ministry partner and very supportive and involved in Raceway Ministries' work too. So how does that dynamic with you and Marilyn being involved in it together, what difference does that make when you go out there to those real people at Berlin Raceway or wherever it is and share the gospel with them? Talk a little bit about being a couple involved in chaplain work there at the local track.
I'm privileged. I just have a wife who loves what I love, and we both love the Lord, and we love each other, and she is far more personable and approachable probably than I would be.
Well, I would have to say she's fun
Yes,
to be around, because she does know how to interact with people.
She, over the years, we have done everything we do in ministry and family together, and
Good.
It's been we'll have been married 54 years this coming July. But at the racetrack, we were taught and still believe that ministry is relationships.
That's right.
And to build a relationship, you have to love what the racers love.
Yeah.
And they love their race cars, and they love their families. Racing at a local level, anyway, is a family sport.
Yes, it is. Very much so.
So that is how we kind of choose over the years, because we go every year, and we've just had our meeting with our local owner at Berlin, and we ask what we can do better, how we can help him put on a better show, how we can be more effective. And he gives us things that we can do and what he wants us to do.
Right.
But for the last several years, Marilyn has been in charge of payout at the racetrack.
Okay.
At the end of the evening, the racing is done. The drivers want to get their pay, and they come to the payout window, and there they greet her. And so she is trusted. I am more involved in walking up and down in the pits, dealing with the guys and talking about their cars and what they got to do to set it up right and make it faster, and be an encourager to them. Quite often we become a good luck charm.
Oh yeah.
I say it's the only mission field in the world where they actually ask you to pray for them. Whether they understand what it is or not is something. But should they win, they want you to pray next week too.
Yes, exactly.
But we work together. We have different venues at the track, because over the years they've learned to trust us.
Good.
And our ministry has changed. One of the highlights of my ministry, when we finally knew that the track and its administration had really bought into having a chaplain on site, was one Saturday night. It was particularly hot, had a huge crowd, car counts 120, 130 cars. And I was involved in the pits, and all of a sudden I hear on the radio, "Where's Larry? Where's Larry? Where's Larry?" and they red flagged the race and had to get me across the track. We had a young lady from the top row, which is probably 4 stories up, fell from the grandstand down through the bleachers.
Oh, my goodness.
And they wanted to know where I was and to get me across the track to go minister. And at that point, I knew I had known. But, you always wonder, am I doing any good?
Sure.
Because ministry is subjective at best.
Right.
Because we always would like to see results. But I went across the track, and sure enough, the parents were drunk. The girl needed to be transported. They were from out of town, and I had the privilege of taking them to the hospital in Grand Rapids. Of course, I actually rode in the ambulance because the parents were drunk, and they had to have somebody from the track escort them to the hospital. And that was the beginning of knowing that, yes, we are effective. People respect us and want us to be effective for their good. Sure. It's for the good of the track.
Sure,
really.
Sure.
And that was probably the highlight. There have been many other exciting, terrible crashes. One time, a 7-car pile up on the front stretch on the very start of the race. 6 cars piled up, and the guy on the bottom of the pile just woke up. He'd been knocked silly. And he told me after, he says, "You knew it was really serious when the first person I saw was the preacher."
Kind of a wake-up call for him that, hey, this is bad.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the kind of ministry we've had, but that's what it is.
First of all, I want to say congratulations on 54 years of marriage. That's absolutely awesome. And what a blessing to have someone like Marilyn by your side. You mentioned a couple of things in what you just described that I think might be worth underscoring for our listeners. You went and sat down with the track owner recently to dialogue with him, and I love what you said, to talk with him about how can we be more effective in the upcoming year. And I know a lot of guys that do ministry at some of the short tracks and even at the larger tracks. They just kind of go and they do their thing and they are there, they're around, but they really don't ever get into any dialogue with the track owner to hear their heartbeat, to hear what their priorities are, and to listen very carefully at what they can and can't do and what the owner wants them to do. I think that kind of dialogue with a track owner can open up opportunities that maybe we never fathomed would come. And the other thing that you described is very, very essential. We may feel like we're not part of the team. We may feel like we're not very effective, and we wonder, is it worth being here? But when a crisis comes, that's when typically the Raceway staff and the owner are very alert and very sensitive to the fact that we need someone here, and we have someone here who can respond to things that I don't know how to respond to and I don't have time for. The director and the operations people and all those people, they have their hands full running the event. And to have someone like you and Marilyn to jump in and participate, you being the chaplain ready for a crisis, Marilyn being over there at the payout booth ready to participate and be a part of the team, those things are very essential. And it comes through what you described, relationships. It's all about relationships. And so, Larry, I deeply appreciate what you've said about building solid relationships with the staff there at Berlin Speedway. Sounds to me like you're very much part of the team and an essential part of their program each and every time they open up the gates there.
Well, we want to be essential, and one of the things we found out is that if the relationship isn't strong, the show is going to go on, whether or not we're there.
Oh, yeah.
And if we want to continue having that opportunity to serve the Lord by serving people, we have to be faithful.
True.
And I have gentlemen all the time, or people say, "Oh man," they'll ask me on Sunday, "How'd the races go last night?" And most often I will say, "I have no clue."
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
I've been with people, and a guy crashes, and so I run to his pit and see what I can do to help, if anything, or stop a fight because I know it's coming. Yeah. But one of the advantages, for instance, of building those relationships over the years, just this week, in fact, I haven't had it yet, the track owner of one of the local dirt tracks called me and asked me to call a family because they had a fatality, an automobile, and I have a funeral next Tuesday.
Oh, my.
Because the track owner knows, well, Pastor Larry Chaplain Larry, he'll come and be of some help.
Exactly.
And, of course, I get the privilege of in crisis, but I also get the privilege through those relationships. I cannot tell you how many weddings that I get to do.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And more importantly, the counseling before the wedding.
Yeah, exactly.
And getting to talk with young couples and establishing. So relationships. We've found over the years, we've had children's ministry out on the grandstands on the concourse.
Right.
We've had, of course, race drivers and team ministry, but it's shifted over the years. Our ministry now is really been focused in the last 4 or 5 years with staff.
Gotcha.
And every year, new staff members come on board. They want to know what to expect, where they should be, what they should be doing. And because we've been there so long, we know.
Sure.
And so it is just... To be effective, you have to be there.
You really do. And you know, what you just described in that last little segment that you talked about, new staff coming on the Speedway, you've been there for a long time. In essence, you become a life coach for these people, you know, to help them get oriented, keep them calm, you know, get their feet on the ground and get plugged into the rhythm of what things are going to be going on in the weeks and months ahead. And how essential. I mean, that's a vital part of getting these people settled in so that the raceway can function at a top level. And so, again, there is an essential relationship that comes from your faithfulness, your dedication, your accessibility. All those things are extremely important. Now, I want to shift gears just for a second, though, because everything that you described almost in many venues came to a screeching halt in 2020. You know, the race season started with a bang back in January with the Rolex 24 and all that over in Daytona 500 in February. Excitement was huge on the part of people in the NASCAR world. A new season, you know, all the local venues were getting ready to crank up in March and April and that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden this pandemic hit. How did that impact you guys there at Berlin, and how did ministry go for you during the pandemic?
Well, it's a good question. We began our scheduled opening for Test and Tune, of course, is the first Saturday of April. And by then, of course, we were shut down in Michigan completely, and that was put on hold. Then we found out that the quarantine continued and continued. The dirt tracks somehow were able to continue racing. Most of them started in May.
Okay.
The asphalt tracks, Kalamazoo Speedway, Berlin Raceway, some of the other tracks could not open at all. But Berlin put a plan together, and we've actually got 4 weeks in before, once again, the governor shut us down for whatever reason.
Right.
But what I did and what Marilyn and I did together is we called some of the key staff members that we know. Some of them really very much so depend on the racetrack as a source of their income.
Okay, sure.
And so it's really tough for them. But we called, and we have 6. We picked out 6 key track staff and have met with them throughout the summer monthly. And at one point, we could go into restaurants here. Now we cannot, now it's been reinstated. We can't go into a restaurant to eat.
Right.
But at that point, we could, and we would meet at a restaurant, but about once a month for 4 months, just to stay in touch with them, to see how they were doing, what we could do to help them, how can we make it better. And those are the kind of things we did.
Good.
Impacting the track at Berlin, it's a beautiful facility. They don't feel they can function and profitably unless they have at least 5,000 people in the grandstands. But the health department allowed us to have 1,000.
Oh, no.
Well, then we invited them out. They invited them out, and they went through our facility and said, okay, we have 16 sections of bleachers, and they will allow us 100 people per section.
Wow.
Which is 1,600 people.
Okay.
In the infield, they allowed us unlimited, but mask, of course, had to be worn.
Sure.
Try that on for size with a racer.
Oh, no. I know. Yeah. How frustrating is that?
We did put on a month of shows. We had
Good.
a good show, and the drivers were anxious, of course, but none of them, with a shortened season, really wanted to wreck their brand new cars for just a 4-week season with no championship points or anything.
Yeah.
So it was difficult on them, and it was difficult for the staff to open up a huge facility for just 4 races.
Sure.
So it was different, but we didn't suffer like the folks who are really out of work. But so many of the folks really depend on that part-time money.
Sure. Yeah.
All day Saturday. Usually we were allowed to go to practice. We had several practices throughout the summer. The track could open because no one comes, in the grandstands. So we ministered at the what they call open practices for all divisions and classes.
Good.
But ministry-wise goes on because we continue to ask for, through these staff members, prayer requests.
Yeah.
And whether a person is a Christian or not, most people recognize the power of prayer and will ask for prayer. And so we continue to ask, what can I pray with you about? Well, some it was a job, some it was family, some anything like that.
Right.
So we've maintained contact with at least our small world of the race world.
Well, it sounds like, again, your faithfulness, your commitment, and your availability to continue those relationships paid some good dividends even during the pandemic. And of course, it's not over. We still have issues going on with the pandemic, and even though the vaccine has become available, it's still going to be a long time, apparently, before this thing flattens out. As we go into a new year, 2021, how do you plan to attack it? The new year in terms of racing is kind of open-ended. A lot of unknowns. We really don't know what to expect in terms of attendance and schedules and crowd capacities and all those different things. And then you have this new strain of coronavirus over in Great Britain that everybody's kind of alarmed about, understandably so. So how do you plan to attack the new year? Business as usual?
We hope. We just got word. Our opening Saturday is again the first Saturday of April.
Uh-huh.
And they will be open practices for the test and tune and setup and all of that.
Okay.
And opening night will be the third Saturday.
Okay.
It's called the Icebreaker up here, obviously.
Yep.
And it's always too cold to race anyway, so it'll probably get moved back. But as it stands right now, they are going to allow us at the present time, if the current restrictions hold, we will be able to have the 100 people per section. The question is whether the track owner wants to bite the bullet and take the loss.
Yeah, right.
So it may be work with limited staff. I know they sent out our schedule. It's a 22-week schedule. Ends up in September, begins in April. And so right now, it's full speed ahead. They've scheduled our staff meeting, which is important for us to go to and meet the new staff and put together what they expect of us and everybody, really. So right now, we're planning the first week of April.
Well, good. That's
subject to fail. Subject to change.
That is great to hear. Well, 2021 is going to be very open-ended for all of us, I think, to kind of watch and see what develops and how it happens. And I know you being a part of the board of directors with National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, we're kind of struggling with the same thing. It's going to be an open-ended thing. We're going to have to kind of roll with the punches and see which way it goes. Whether or not we get back to normal in terms of how we do ministry at the larger speedways with NASCAR, IndyCar, ARCA, and so forth remains to be seen. But we'll work on that, and I think everybody's attitude is going to be a lot like yours. We're just going to be ready to go. We're going to be on standby. And if everything opens up to where it gets back to some semblance of normal, we'll jump in like we did before, even though it may take new approaches, new methods, and new ideas. Let me ask you this. You've already touched on this a lot, Larry, and I really appreciate your sincerity and your willingness to throw out some ideas as we've talked today about what's effective and what works. For those who might already be involved in ministry at a local track, what are the keys to remaining effective? If you were to pick out one or two things to say, man, make sure you do this as you continue on in your ministry or there at that local track, what would be a couple of keys to remaining effective?
I think the first and most important is be available.
Okay.
You may be asked to do something that is not in your purview of what a chaplain should be doing.
Sure.
Be available
Yep.
to help where needed, even in the off season. What do they need? We volunteered last year at the end of the season before pandemic hit, for instance. We knew they were short-staffed anyway. It's been a long year.
Right.
And we volunteered, can I come and help you winterize the place?
Okay.
Shut down the water pipes and get the water pipes all cleaned and so on. I'm a consummate volunteer. Anybody ask me, I'll do it.
Good.
But I mow the soccer fields for our soccer club here in Muskegon, which is big, 15 acres every week that I will mow all summer. Well, why do I do that? Because I'm a glutton for punishment? No, because I love kids, I love people, and I want to serve. And if you're going to be effective at a racetrack, you may have to pass out programs.
Yeah.
Empty garbage cans. You're going to have to do things to make yourself accessible to them.
Well, I think what that translates into is if you're accessible for those things, then the owner, the director of operations, whoever it may be, they know they can call on you for anything, and you're going to respond. And I think that builds a good relationship.
And they get so they depend on you, which can be good, and it can be a hindrance as well.
That's true.
Sometimes your focus, you now are focused on stuff and not people.
Yeah.
And you have to guard against that, but you have to be very careful in your guarding that it is really, truly a priority.
Yeah, that's a good point.
With our owner, they've asked us to do things at different times, and I sat down with him and I've said, this is beyond what our mission is, and I would appreciate you honoring our commitments as well.
Good.
And usually they will. Usually they understand, oh, okay, I didn't understand. I didn't see how this was taking your time or whatever.
Sure.
But you have to be transparent, and you have to have a relationship strong enough to be honest and transparent.
So very true. Well, now for those folks who might be interested in or feeling called to ministry at a local track, what would be the keys to getting started?
Get training.
Okay, good.
You know, most Christian church members think I've been to Sunday school and I know the Bible. That's all good and well, but I'm not sure that is the most effective way to begin your ministry at a racetrack.
Yes.
Get training. Learn the language.
Right.
Understand the culture. People have asked, particularly when we first began, why do you want to go be with those people?
Yeah.
Well, and they would say, because they're this, that, or the other thing. And I would say, well, they're people that Jesus loves.
That's right.
And if I love Jesus, I'm going to love what he loves. But beyond that, there's a lot of ways to get training. Come and walk in our shoes.
Yeah.
Or NFRM, or Motor Racing Outreach, or Racers for Christ that offer training in what you can and can't do at a racetrack, and what you can say and what you can't say, and find out. And the most important to me, and this is really, you understand that if you say, I want to be a track chaplain, you just lost your summer.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And are you willing to give up your summer?
Yeah.
Or what it is for short track ministry and be committed to every week, then we'll talk.
Yes, exactly.
So I think that's probably the two most important things: get training and make sure that you really understand what you're getting.
Well, I couldn't agree more. You know, Jesus with his disciples, they walked along with him and he mentored them and dialogued with them and talked a lot with them before he sent them out. And by the time the Great Commission came along, he had invested a lot of time in them, and they had spent a lot of time with him. And so the training, whether it's formal training in a seminar or online, or just mentoring by walking with someone through the Saturday night after Saturday night, so very important. And then the other thing you mentioned is equally important, I think, especially with regard to a spouse. I know some guys that got involved in local dirt track ministry, and after a while their wives said, you mean every Saturday night you're going to be gone? You know, it's a commitment that you need to count the cost. And if you count the cost and weigh it and decide that this is what God has called me to do, and I'm on board, my family's on board, let's go for it. I think God will bless it and God will honor it. And obviously God has blessed and provided lots of opportunities for you and Marilyn there at Berlin and beyond. And Larry, I just can't thank you enough for sharing your heart. Wow. We've been talking here on this podcast with Larry Bush. Larry is a pastor up in Muskegon, Michigan. He and his wife very much involved in doing ministry at Berlin Raceway, and lots of good experience, lots of good wisdom. Larry, I just want to say again, thank you for what you do, who you are. Thank you for your faithfulness and your commitment, your participation with National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. What a blessing it's been. And I want to take the opportunity to wish you and Marilyn a very, very Merry Christmas, and hope you have a great time celebrating the birth of Christ with family and friends. And do you have any final thoughts or final words that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be on with you.
Sure.
And also thank those who are listening and encourage you to continue to watch at Raceway Ministries. Our website is about to go live.
Yes.
And we have this podcast, and we hope to increase our digital footprint across the country. Mm-hmm. And so we ask that you would pray for us.
Absolutely.
That we would be able to minister effectively. And I want to wish you as well, you and your wife, Marcia, Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year.
All right. Well, thank you, Larry. Thank you so very much. Tell Marilyn we may get her on the horn here one day and have a podcast with her to talk about her perspective as a wife involved in Raceway Ministries work. And we would look forward to that. But to all of our listeners, this is going to bring a conclusion to our podcast for today. We've been with Larry Bush, Fast Track Ministries. Go to the website for Berlin Raceway and check it out. Full schedule of activities and events coming up for the year to come, all things being equal. And Larry and Marilyn are going to be right in the middle of the mix of it all. Larry, we appreciate you, and we look forward to next time we get to visit with you personally. I think we have a board meeting coming up online with NFRM here in a week or so, and then we'll be together for our virtual annual conference for NFRM. It's going to take place on January the 29th from 7 to 9 p.m. Going to be very interesting dynamic in pulling off that virtual annual conference. But to all our listeners, we want to ask you to stay in touch with our Facebook page and our website when it gets up and running here in a few days, and all the details about how to plug in, link up to the virtual annual conference will be made available to you. If you want to be a part of our communication network, contact me at rogermarsh13@gmail.com, or you can Facebook message me at Roger Allen Marsh, or through our Facebook page for NFRM. It goes by National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, I believe, and we'll be happy to add you to an email list, contact list, and get all that information out to you. So from Larry Bush and I today, we just want to say farewell and hope to hook up with you later. But meanwhile, hope you all have a very, very Merry Christmas. Well, thanks so much for tuning in for today's podcast. We'll look forward to having you join us for the next edition of Raceway Ministries Today.